You're on the couch with friends, watching a movie everyone picked together. On screen, a character says goodbye to someone they love, and while everyone around you is reaching for the popcorn, you feel it. Your eyes filling, the tightness in your throat. You turn your head slightly toward the window so nobody sees. You've gotten good at that, the quick turn, the art of crying without anyone noticing. You've been told this makes you too sensitive, too soft, that you need thicker skin. But here's the question nobody ever stops to ask. What if the thing you've spent years hiding isn't a weakness at all? What if it's one of the most sophisticated things a human nervous system can do? If that intrigues you, subscribe. This channel goes deep on exactly these kinds of minds. Somewhere along the way, you learned that tears needed an explanation. For a lot of people, that lesson started early, and it usually started with a few short phrases that sound almost harmless until you trace what they actually do to a child. Boys don't cry. Don't be so sensitive. You're fine. Stop making a scene. Each one a small instruction repeated enough times, teaching a kid that a completely normal response was something to hide. A child who cries easily and gets met with discomfort or mockery doesn't stop feeling things deeply. They just learn to perform not feeling them. They learn to excuse themselves to the bathroom, to dig their fingernails into their palm, to swallow it down until the moment passes and they can rejoin the room with a steady face. And the lesson sinks in deeper than most people realize. It doesn't just teach a child to hide tears, it teaches them that some part of who they are is too much for the people around them. That training works in a way. It produces adults who can hold themselves together through almost anything. But the feeling never actually went anywhere. It just went quiet, and it's been resurfacing in elevators and meetings and movie nights ever since. Here's what almost nobody was taught alongside that shame. Crying isn't a malfunction, it's regulation. When you cry from real emotional weight, not from cutting onions, but from grief, overwhelm, or joy too big to hold, your tears carry a different makeup than the ones your eyes produce to clear out dust. Emotional tears contain higher levels of stress hormones, including cortisol. In other words, crying is one of the only ways the human body has to physically flush out the chemicals that stress leaves behind. This is why a real cry, the kind you let move all the way through you, not the kind you choke back, tends to leave you feeling lighter afterward instead of worse. Your nervous system isn't breaking down in that moment, it's finishing something. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. Take an overwhelming wave of feeling and bring the body back to steady ground. So the person who cries easily isn't failing to control their emotions. Their body is simply running that reset more often and more efficiently than the people who taught themselves to hold it in. The held-back tears don't disappear. They just sit in the body, unprocessed, waiting. But there's a cost that almost never gets talked about, and it isn't really about the crying. People who feel things easily often aren't only reacting to their own lives, they're absorbing everyone else's. A friend's bad day sits in your chest after the conversation ends. A tense room tightens your shoulders before you've even worked out why. You leave gatherings that should have been simple and fun feeling strangely drained, like you've been doing work nobody could see. That's not your imagination, it's a real kind of exhaustion, and it happens because your system isn't just tracking how you feel, it's quietly scanning how everyone else feels too. The tone of a voice, the shift in someone's posture, the space between what a person says and what their face is actually doing. All of it gets picked up and felt, usually before a single conscious thought arrives. This is tiring in a way that's genuinely hard to explain to someone whose mind doesn't work like this. It isn't drama, it's bandwidth. You are running more at once than most of the people around you, and because so much of it happens below the surface, you often can't even point to why you're so tired. You just know that being around people costs you something it doesn't seem to cost anyone else. A lot of this comes down to empathy working less like an idea and more like something physical. When you watch someone in pain, really watch them, something in you responds as if it's happening to you. Researchers studying empathy have found that seeing another person suffer lights up some of the same regions in the observer's brain that fire when they're in pain themselves. You aren't just imagining what they feel. On some level, you're feeling a version of it. Part of this comes down to a system in the brain that fires both when you do something and when you simply watch someone else do it. It's the same machinery that makes you wince when you see someone stub their toe or tear up watching a stranger get good news. In people who feel deeply, that system seems to run louder. The boundary between watching an emotion and living it gets thin. Someone else's grief doesn't stay over there at a safe distance. It crosses over and becomes something you carry too. For people with heightened sensitivity, that response runs faster and stronger. The psychologist Elaine Aron, who first studied this trait in depth, found that roughly 15 to 20% of people process emotional and sensory information more deeply than everyone else, something she called high sensitivity. Their nervous systems are simply wired to register more and feel more from the exact moment everyone else is living through. That's not a flaw in the wiring, it's a different setting, and it comes with quiet advantages that rarely get named beside the exhaustion. These are the people who sense what's wrong in a room before anyone says it, who notice the friend who's struggling before that friend has found the words. What gets lost in all of this is something simple. Feeling deeply is not the same as being unstable. Knowing what you feel, being able to name it, understanding why it's there, that's one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity there is. The person who can feel something fully, let it pass through them and return to steadiness, isn't fragile. They're doing the exact thing most people spend years trying to learn. There's a reason so many of the people who move us most, the artists, the writers, the ones who seem to understand something about being human that the rest of us only feel in fragments, sensitivity isn't just something to survive. It's often where depth comes from. The capacity to be moved is the same capacity that lets a person find meaning in things other people walk straight past. And it tends to produce something else worth naming: real compassion. Not the convenient kind that shows up when it's easy, but the kind that makes someone the first person others call when life falls apart, because they don't flinch away from hard emotion. They've lived inside it their whole life. So here's what's worth sitting with. Somewhere along the way, the world decided that composure was strength and feeling was weakness. That decision was wrong, and it cost a lot of people years of quiet shame over something their body was simply built to do well. Crying easily isn't a breakdown. It's a nervous system that processes the full weight of being human instead of burying it. It's a level of attunement to other people that the most of the world is quietly, desperately missing. It takes far more courage to feel something openly than it does to shut it down. The real question was never whether crying is weakness or strength. The real question is why we ever decided that feeling something all the way through needed an apology. It never did, and neither do you.